welcome along to a very special episode of The Journey. First started in 2017 in October. 5 years, over 5 years now, 55 people interviewed, and I'm joined this time around once again by Stephen Mamouney. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Kevin.
Now, you've been one of those people that we've interviewed.
I have. I've sat in the hot seat.
But it's a little different theme today because when the journey started, we had that conversation of, oh, we'll see where this takes us and what we learn and who we see. And for you and for BMG Partners, it's been quite a successful marketing point of difference. But we always said, oh, one day we'll have to change hosts, or if the series ends, we'll do Kev's journey. But we're not doing that today because the journey is going to live on with a new host who we will reveal a little later on. But we thought it'd be appropriate at this point in time, given that there has been 55 people in that hot seat, Stephen, that we'd sort of go through and recap on how the journey came about, I guess what it's enabled BMG to achieve, and just reflect upon some of the highlights and learnings, I think is the important part. Not lowlights, but definitely learnings of putting such a series together. So where should we start, Stephen? What do you think? Should we start at the idea? Because this was your idea that you sort of had a false start on.
It was, sort of where it started from. And look, this is sort of the journey thus far, or Kevin Poulton, the end of an era, as far as the journey goes. But look, the initial idea, I mean, the kernel of the idea came from a conference that we attended in Cairns in 2015. And you always go along to these conferences, and people say, look, if you can do just one thing from the conference, it's a successful conference. So on that measure, Cairns was probably one of the most successful conferences I've ever been to. And, there's a guy there. His name was Tim Reed. He had a business called Helpful Marketing, and he was talking to us about how easy it is for businesses to get online and have a digital presence, and without too much effort and so on. And he gave the example of a guy that had a business down on the bay called the Weather Guy, and he was a guy that just sort of set himself up with his own digital camera, probably used his iPhone back in those days, did a weather forecast for his marina business. And so everyone sort of got the idea of every morning getting up, tuning into his forecast to see what the bay conditions were. And he developed his business on that. And it was a fantastic idea. And so I've got my notes here as a key action idea from this conference. Here's my conference notes. So you can tell them again. I've got this well filed, and was to do a video podcast interview with a range of different interesting people. And most of these are sort of business related, but some celebrities, and it could also work with videos. And I've got here ... John Walker, Simon Core ... And so me and one of the guys from the office, when we got back, we thought we would put this into action. So we got our iPhones out and we did a couple of interviews in the office and had a look at them, and we thought, actually, these are rubbish. There's no way we can put these out there. And it was through, I guess, my involvement with the Big Splash and with Simon Core and Robbie McKinlay doing interviews with me on the radio. I thought, well, why don't I found that because when you're talking in front of a camera, oddly enough, to me it's really, really difficult because you get so preoccupied with that. I thought, well, but on the radio, to be honest with you, when you're talking to someone, it just doesn't feel the same way. And I thought, well, why don't we get 2AY involved? And so we had a chat. I had a coffee with Simon, and Simon said, well, actually, this is something that he would like. He's been thinking about getting something like this going for quite a while as well. And he took it on board and brought it back to Ace Radio, and they really embraced the idea. And since then, it had become a collaboration between 2AY and ourselves, and all the different participants and the people involved in the journey. It's been fantastic. And
I think at the time when I entered the planning phase, someone said, so Kev, your role to play here is to be the Andrew Denton. And I said, no, don't even try to pretend I'm anywhere near Andrew Denton, but I'll give it a go. I'll try my best. So here we are. It's successfully set apart, I guess, BMG Partners. Your mission, I guess, is enabling people to achieve. and you've certainly heard how people have achieved their goals, or are still working towards it. And there's definitely been lots of learnings over the past 5+ years.
I'm constantly not really surprised anymore, but inspired by the people you come across in Albury, Wodonga and surrounding regions who have got a wonderful story to tell. And initially, we sort of thought, well, okay, who could some of those people be? And we learned a lot from those early times. And when we first started, we didn't know how many we were going to do, and how it was going to go. And things have changed a lot. If you can recall, back when Travis Cartwright was doing the videography, and you would have been involved then with the.
I remember Stephen getting driven up to Beechworth and sitting in the Beechworth bakery with Tom O'Toole. I remember that was probably one of our first episodes. Really, I remember asking him one question and him talking for 45 minutes without any more questions. I almost felt like I didn't need to be there anymore. Wonderful journey captured there. The road trip out to Danny Fegan's farm out at Walla Walla, just out of Walla Walla. And dusty roads and the conditions of the winds howling through, in a real life brewery sitting up there, in Beechworth again, and they've got the vats, they're doing their thing, and here we are trying to figure out how these people and therefore their businesses and what they were doing, what their key to success was. Mm-hmm. And there's some, I guess, really fond memories there around the learnings of when you go into other people's environment to produce audio and video, hence the pivot back to a studio now in more recent times to make sure it's a good quality product that's going out for people to learn the best they can.
Yeah, and that was one of the ideas of getting out and showcasing some of the areas of the region down by the Murray River with Alex Smith.
Yes.
And which seemed like a good idea at the time. And
there was a lot of flies that day with Alex Smith. There was a lot of flies buzzing around our microphones. And
the heavy video, the videoing of each of them. We being, you get the video back and you review it and say, no, I don't like that bit at 4 minutes and 52 seconds and cut that out. But that's all gone by the wayside now. I think we've learnt a hell of a lot in that time.
Particularly how genuine people are. I think, and how they expect a genuine response to questions, and I think we've managed to achieve that in the more recent episodes, that's for sure. And we'll continue to do that, Stephen. We'll get to the new host a little bit later on. But for me, I think about other memories and learnings. Matt Daly with the Posh Plonk, like a new brand, and his wife, and sorting out life here in Albury, Wodonga, and tying back into it, and then. I laughed, because we aired it on 2AY and we had the video going around on social media, and then my mum said, "Oh, you've met Matt Daly." And I said, "Yeah, do you know Matt?" She goes, "He's your second cousin." and I had to ring him straight away and go, "The whole time I've interviewed you, I had no idea we were related." And so now whenever he calls or I call him or we cross paths, I'm like, "Hey, cuz, how's it going?" So it's amazing if you've had the opportunity to open your eyes to our region and listen to people that have moved in or have come from afar and what they really enjoy about the region. There's actually a real common theme through them all. And Stephen, I think what I've found is for anyone that takes Albury, Wodonga and surrounds and decides that's where they want to set up their business or they want to set up their family or they come back, maybe they've had some ties here previously, because that is where we start each journey. They're all good people. And I'd say no matter where you go in Australia, you'd hope to find good people. But here, if you sat all 55 people that we've done the journey for in a room and said, let's solve the problem, whatever the problem might be, I can almost guarantee they'll all come out with a unanimous outcome just because of the type of person they are that really appreciate the work-life balance. They really appreciate what they've been given for life. They like giving back to others quite often is a theme that you come across. And it's funny because when we talk about, the best sayings that you've heard or a mantra that you live by or whatever it might be, every one of them has given a different response. Yet I bet they'd all accept each other's.
It's amazing. And if you look down the list, the breadth of vocations and what these people are doing. And so we've, whether it be tradespeople or sports people or artists or business people or creative people, scientific people. It's a whole range of different people we've had on the journey, and it's I look at the list and I'll probably.
Do you want to pick some out?
Sure, yeah, we do a bit of.
Do you want me to throw a number at you and you can tell me who it was that we interviewed in that order, and I'll try to remember their story?
You can, because I must admit I've done my best to follow each of the stories, but it's there's you look back on the list and think, oh, that's right. I remember that one, and
let's go to number.
You give me a number, and you can tell me what stood out about this video.
We'll go with 13, because 13 would have been just past the 1 year anniversary, and I can't genuinely remember who was the 13th person we interviewed.
Okay, this is good, and this is topical as well. So this is number 13 was David Martin, and David's a Vietnam War veteran and the CEO of the Murray Valley Centre.
Now, since David's journey, and that was an emotional one, where he reflected upon the father that he never knew, and etc., and his time serving, a Vietnam veteran, what it was like to return home to Australia. But since then, he's gone on to become a Citizen of the Year in Wodonga. He's then become a 1 in 4 finalist to take out the state crown of that. And he continues to still deliver for the Murray Valley Centre, and fit and healthy now when you come across him in the park. But he's trying to make sure that's transition, that important sort of service and support in our community. He's still doing good community-facing stuff right up and well and truly past retirement age.
And still involved with the Vietnam vets,
yes.
and furthering their cause, of course.
Yeah, and getting the youth into RSLs throughout Victoria and Australia. And a great example. Who else? What number? You're a numbers man. Do you want to pick a number?
No, you give me a number. Go
all
on.
right, I'll give you one. Let's go for number 21.
Number 21, okay. Well, 21, okay, this is Simon Craig, who's a Wodonga, a local obstetrician.
That was a really good conversation with Simon. That was, I think, one of our first ones in the studio, or back in the studio, I think.
Yep.
And Simon, it's funny, he's brought so much life to our region, and I don't think anyone truly really knows who he is or what he does. And when he came in and sat down and said, what would you want to talk to me for? I've had to think about, looking at other episodes, what you might ask me and what have you. Again, a genuine, down-to-earth person who just gets in and gets their job done. But was refreshing to speak to. This how humble he was about the impact he has on expectant mums and expectant families, and bringing life into the world. What a rewarding job, but just does it.
But I think that's one of the things that when you talk to people and think, who would be interested in my story? And it's something that you understand, or you come to learn just from starting a conversation with someone, whether it be day to day. And you start talking to them and think, wow, this person's got this is interesting. And it naturally people will think, oh, no one's really interested in my story. But the reality is that there's so many people here that have got terrific stories. And I think that's one of the most inspiring things about living in a community, is that you come across ordinary people with just extraordinary stories to tell.
I'm still stuck in a time warp here at the moment, because if 13 was David Martin, 21 was our obstetrician, to me they feel like some of the more recent ones. But since then, there's been over 20 or 30 more. There's been 34 more since Simon. So what? Let's go into 28th is my birthday. So on the 28th of September. What's 28? Who have we got 28?
Okay, 28. So 28 was Jack Siebel, captain of the North Melbourne Football Club.
Feels like yesterday. He came in here in an off-season, so he happened to be in town visiting family. I think I might have asked him, what would you go to jail for? I think might have been one of the questions, or there was something like that I asked him. Is that even
on the script? Or not?
I know, it might have been for a very short moment, because I think I realised it was a very dangerous question to ask, and particularly someone with such a protected profile like a footballer, a skipper of a team. But he went along with that really nicely. I think the response was something around motorbike riding in the bush or something like that, and maybe not being on a track at the right time. But you could tell that having grown up in our region in the fields, like in the farm areas, and the name synonymous around town, and then he's transitioned into town and schooling, and again locally raised. That was a really good conversation. Even more so as a North Melbourne fan, Stephen. It was great to sit there and go, I'm talking to the current skipper of our club. Not many other people are doing that. It was a very rewarding experience. Let's go into the 30s. Let's start at 32.
Okay, so 32. Okay, different background. This is Helen Newman. So Helen's with Nomad Films, a filmmaker.
How amazing that since then she's gone on with that Solstice production, because at that point in time when we spoke, that was a primitive body of work of which she'd received a bit of funding and I'd crossed paths with through Border Trust and different presentations to try to get it there. Yet as we sit here and talk today, the international screenings of it, the acceptance of the conversation, the recap, she's done a wonderful job. And I think even back then, even though when we spoke she was an experienced and passionate filmmaker, if you sat down and spoke to her today, she's probably almost achieved not everything she would have ever set out to do with that passion, but definitely you'd be proud of where you've got to from those years ago when we had that conversation.
And I know it would have been a very emotional journey.
Yeah.
For Helen putting that documentary together.
And the grief she'd been through herself.
And it's amazing. Really amazing.
Worth going back and listening to.
Yeah,
definitely worth going back or watching as well. Let's go 37.
Staying in the 30s then. 37. So 37. Now, this is Sarah Stam from Salisbury and Maud. Now, when Sarah first learnt that she was coming onto the journey, and she got in touch with me and said, well, Stephen, I'm so grateful for the invitation, and did you realise that my mum gave, and her mum were good buddies at school.
Right.
Or from that era.
Yeah.
And, and had been, great support to each other. I remember Sarah's mum showing up in Downside Street at the family home a couple of days after my dad passed away with a roast leg of lamb. So good country people come along with a roast leg of lamb, and I didn't really know Sarah's mum or family that well, other than I remember that one moment.
Mm-hmm.
So the connection there, but so that was, and Sarah's got a terrific story with her business to tell.
Fascinating around the crafty sort of nature, the city and the Instagram and the all that digital world and the success, and is just happy doing what she's doing because it's her hobby. And that's another one of those themes that I spoke about earlier. You find a lot of the people we've spoken to are doing what they genuinely love doing. It's not a job. It's just what they love doing. And she was definitely one of those that drove that message home of being lucky and fortunate, and it had the challenges with relocating family and all the rest to come back to the region. But yeah, great conversationalist too. A few little laughs in that one.
Give me another one more. Give me another number, Kev.
All right, 46. Let's go 46.
Okay, now before I give you the name of the person who we interviewed at 46, right? We talked earlier on about how the first episodes of the journey were videoed, they were edited, they were back and forth for approval and so on. And then at some stage during the journey's evolution, we decided, no, that's just not the way to go. We basically did just a raw video, and pretty much it's aired and recorded as it is, with very little editing whatsoever. Now, we should reassure anyone who is listening and watching this particular story that this isn't scripted. I've got a list. Kevin hasn't got the list of people. He's just given me numbers. So this is straight off the top. This is straight out of Kevin's head. It's not we haven't set this up beforehand.
No planning at all, which is how I do my life. You don't want to hear that though.
More about that in a moment. But so Joan Parker was number 46, and Joan's the former mayor of Holbrook.
Yes, and that was fun. Being mayor at the time and talking to a previous mayor, and hearing about the whole submarine concept, the fanfare of this crazy idea that the hard community work, not just hers, but the entire community having to truck parts of submarines back and try to come up with that idea. And I'm sure their entire community, once bypassed, is eternally grateful for that point of difference. The inland submarine. How many people stop there and have their sandwich or go to the cafe or fill up with fuel in Holbrook? It's not necessarily because you have to stop there. There's lots of places you could, but just that one simple move and community spirit and being united and bringing it all together. It was a trip down, sort of yesteryear of community spirit in that particular journey. And I think you remember a lot of that, but it also made you reflect and appreciate that we probably still need more of that in our communities to this day. So, and the more we get digital, interference in our lives and things like that, the more we should go back to some of those simple, basic sort of principles in life.
Yeah, and you certainly learn from every interview you watch. There's always something, I never knew that, or I didn't know that about that person, or I didn't know that about this area, or that's actually a saying I've never heard of. I like it.
Yep.
So you're picking something up all the time, and I'm always so inspired by it. I mean, you often are when you hear someone's story, when they've got a great story to tell, and everyone has got a great story to tell.
And that's the whole thing. Everybody's got a book in them. We don't get anywhere near a book in the half hour, 40 minutes that we chat on the journey, but you get a good snapshot into how somebody operates and how they work and why they belong in our community, like why they fit in here. And I think you talk about the sayings, it's almost like a good joke. When someone puts you on the spot and says, tell us a joke, and you go, geez, I've heard that many, I've laughed that many times, but what are they? The sayings across these journeys, if anybody's got the time, maybe I'll do that soon, but happy for people to go back and listen to everybody's response to that question. You could almost put a motivational book together just with all those philosophies, mantras and sayings. But the one that really stuck with me, and I don't know it word for word, so you'll have to forgive me, but the episode with Danny Fegan, which was early in the piece, was where he said, you give the best of you to complete strangers every day, and those you love get what's left. And for me, for the last 2 years, more so the last 4 months, as I've made the decision to sort of leave media and what have you in ridiculous working hours, and a lot of people sort of make you feel like you're doing something silly because they say we don't know how you do it. But it was the one thing I thought of was from the journey, Danny's saying of it was time for me to stop giving the best of me to everybody else and get back to home pretty much. So it's good when you've been part of the journey, and if you have paid so much attention, I feel like I've almost been shaped a bit by each episode, Stephen, to be honest.
So you've drawn on that.
Yep.
That particular gem.
Yep.
Probably a few years after you'd heard it.
He said it. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is that when you go through life and you hear something or you observe something, and then it may not mean much to you at the time, but later on in life, you think, oh, actually, I'm going to use that now. That's valuable, and particularly when you meet people who have an impact on you, as you do, or as we have really with. Well,
it's funny because even as I'm throwing these numbers at you, I genuinely can't remember who it was, how far down that 5 years of journey it is. They all feel like they've sat here one day after another, but yet it's sort of monthly we sit down and do it. But it's amazing how quickly you forget who it was that you'd attribute the quote to. It's only because of Danny's circumstance where we're sitting on the barn, the barn veranda in rocking chairs having a beer, and he drops that nugget of gold. That's why I know who said it. But it could have been any one of the 55. Do you want a couple more numbers?
Go on.
Where are we up to? We're in the 40s yet?
We were at, Joan was 46, yes. It doesn't have to be in any particular order. You can throw a number at me, any old number.
Let's go back to number 3. Let's go back in time to number 3.
3, it's a ripper. It's a ripper. Okay, Steve Bowen.
Oh, so the thing about the journey is, and having worked in radio and the community, representation over years, there's not many people I haven't met or haven't had a story with. There's heaps I haven't, but it feels like you almost know a little bit about most people. And Steve Bowen and I first met when I was, I'm going to say 20 or 21. Not first met, but first started working together. So as a kid growing up here, like every kid, even to this day, and my eldest child's about to have it shortly. Steve Bowen did the year 6 disco at my school. He did my year 10 disco, probably the year 12 one. Yeah, and I just had an interest in music, and I'd done some volunteering at the community radio station here as a teenager, and I just thought, geez, it'd be fun to work with that guy. Like, I thought it might be fun. So we actually worked together on and off for a period of about, I'm going to say 8 to 10 years. I was one of his employees. Did weddings, nightclubs, pubs, you name it, comparing events. I knew Steve really well. We'd catch up after every gig on the road. You'd usually have pizza late in the early hours of the morning, or you might get a sausage roll from the service station on your way back in. You'd have up to 16, 18 of us guys working for Steve, travelling out to nightclubs anywhere up to 200 or 300 k's away, and we'd usually all come back together and then go to bed at wee hours of the morning, particularly on a New Year's Eve, because we'd all be sober and working to make sure everyone else had a good time. And to sit down with Steve and learn things about him, he always shook left-handed. I never really understood why, but I just knew it was a point of difference and it put people off guard. And he still does that to this day. To hear just some of his more heartfelt philosophies, I think, for how he is and why he is the way that he is. And then again, even since that journey, he's the Deputy Mayor of Albury now, which I don't think was ever, when we sat down those 5 years ago, wasn't on his radar to even do. So again, you'd go back and watch that now. And I think even any of our journey participants might go back and watch it now and probably learn how much they've changed themselves over a period of those 5, 3, 2, whatever years it is since we've sat down together.
And for those of you who don't know why Steve doesn't shake or does shake with his left hand, I'm not going to give it away. You'll need to go and watch his journey or listen to it on the podcast. But Steve also at the same time he used his journey as a promo, and he got a couple of gigs in overseas.
America. He went to America as a guest speaker and became. He was a president of the DJ Alliance of Australia, and from that got invited to the International Conference of DJs to speak about his journey off the back of what he had as a video. I forgot about that. Again, you forget these things that you learn. It's almost worth going back and revisiting if you haven't. Or maybe, and we know, people constantly get exposure to the journey and the most recent episodes through someone they know being interviewed. But don't be afraid to go back, add it to your favourite playlists, go from start to finish, and you'll be on the ride with us. You'll see where we've come back indoors, or we've tried something new, or you'll know all about it. You'll definitely know all about it.
Kev, the pandemic.
Yep.
Okay, so the pandemic sort of came along in early 2020. What have you noticed about the interviews, and the tone and the sort of feeling when you're talking to people pre-pandemic and during the pandemic and now?
Again, it's been helpful, I think, for me to be probably more emotionally intelligent myself. And I say that because when everything's fine and dandy and there's no international threat or concern and there's no welfare or safety threat and things like that, which is essentially the world we were all living in, right? We're all just going about our day. Yes, there was things that gave us concerns, but then you're stripped back to realise there's only one thing that matters, and that's probably your life and those around you that you love and you spend time with. And we all got that beautiful opportunity, and then we all thought, let's not accelerate too quickly. And then I feel like we've all accelerated back again, and we're being demanded to participate in life. And it's like, no, hang on, we slowed down and we liked that. So it's been really interesting to watch, but I think the common theme in those journeys immediately after lockdowns, because we did pause there for a few months, and immediately after lockdowns, in the middle of all the waves and everything, everybody just reinforced their natural values, and they weren't ashamed to make those choices anymore. So if they had to say to an employer, I don't want to work 5 days a week, they've done it. Or if they've had to say, I need to be there at the school assembly, they've done that. Some people might have already been doing that, but there's a bucket load more that are owning their own responsibilities, their own accountability, and definitely their own lives and livelihoods now, post-pandemic, than what there was pre. That's for sure.
A lot of getting back to basics and what's identifying or probably learning what was really important to people about yourselves. And I remember listening to some of those stories, of what people went through in the pandemic, not being able to see their families in times of need. Having family members in Melbourne and they couldn't get to them because of the lockdowns and so on. I think, that was a terrible, probably part of our lives really that we've got through. But I think at the same time we've learnt so much about ourselves.
The creativity, the pivot, the great pivot, that's been captured in the journeys as well, particularly those business-orientated journeys that we've done. And then those that just happened to be prepared. Just by chance, they were already doing something that was able to be done remotely or at distance, or the software, or it's been the inspiration of an app, like I think of Dimity Field. So Dimity with her recording other people's conversations, are similar to what we're doing now, but taking it into households to get the grandparents and everybody captured. A
lasting tale.
That's it. And you think she'd already been doing that before the pandemic, but how great that she was there with something digital that could be done and has probably accelerated as people do value the untold stories in their lives, immediately. We've probably covered a fair bit, I think, in there, Stephen, but I guess the main message is it's not going to end. The journey isn't going to end. The end is nowhere near yet because just somehow by a complete accident from a conference, as we heard earlier in Cairns, probably not an accident, from determination, Stephen, I think, to make sure you got something out of your trip to Cairns and put it into action. The journey continues and enters, I guess, a new chapter. And we need to talk about this because this is quite good, that whilst we have this on the BMG Partners website, whilst it's available on podcasts at the moment, this will actually, all 55 episodes to date will get captured in time with Albury City. This is good.
This is a terrific development for the Journey series, and so the Albury City through the Albury Library Museum are going to store all of our Journey episodes in perpetuity, which is fantastic. So we've got all those stories on our website and through the channels, whether on podcast and so on. But I think this is fantastic, and what it does is just opens up those stories to be preserved. And I think it's really it's important. I mean, it's you often think if only we'd spoken to someone and recorded that, and this is going to happen. It's a really great initiative.
Yeah, and it'll be one that I haven't thought too much about, but there's a good chance my grandkids at some point in time will stumble across that in the local library museum and go, look what Grandad got up to.
Uncle Kev.
Should we get to the point now? Usually we've figured out 30 minutes or thereabouts is about the optimum time for you to be on the wind trainer to listen to the journey. Is that right? No, we know through feedback over the years, everybody's sort of like, half an hour, that's sort of around about where I fit it into my drive or my exercise routine, my walk, whatever it might be. So should we introduce the new host?
I think we should. We should. We need a drum roll, or
well, I think we probably should tell him to come into the studio first. So
okay, right.
if we go and do that right now, he'll be back here in just a moment. You're on the journey, thanks to BMG Partners with Stephen Mamouney and Kev Poulton. All right, so Stephen Mamouney, it is time to reveal our new host of the journey for the many years that are going to come ahead and many, many stories to be told. Matt Griffith. Hello and welcome to the journey for the first time.
Hello, gents. Stephen, hello.
Welcome on board, Matt.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited. I have to admit that sometimes when I look at Stephen, in my mind, I'm picturing a man in Speedos, because one of the most memorable occasions that I've had with Steve was down at the river when you were training for that extraordinary
the ice mile,
and it was freezing cold, and I just stood back and watched as you plunged in just those tiny Speedos and just thinking, you are more of a man than I am, Stephen, that's for sure.
For those on the podcast that can't see the video footage at the moment, when none of us are in Speedos, Stephen, I'm glad Matt shared that memory. Do you want to share a couple of your memories and highlights, just so Matt will know what to expect as he steps into this chair and starts to meet and learn lots about other people? What are some of the highlights you've had?
Yeah, certainly. There's no doubt that each story you hear, you pick up a little gem and your inspiration and so on. And it's interesting. Kev always asks, what are the sayings and mantras that people resonate with. And funnily enough, it's how often is it sort of something from mum and dad's advice, something that they've heard when they were younger that's sort of kept with them all the way through. And but I think you could live your life by being inspired by the journeys as they come through, and it's a good little little gems of advice. You could learn and live from that. But there's a couple of things that sort of when without even looking at the list the other day, and I thought, well, okay, some of the interesting things or the highlights for me was the interview with John Walker.
Oh.
Now, John lives out of town down at Beechworth Way, and so drives into town every day. And John's, when he talked about the cows having different expressions on their faces every day, it was just gold. And often when I'm driving and I see a cow, I think, he's right. They do. And the other one for me was Rosalie Martin. Rosalie, who took over Martin's buses after her husband had passed away. And Kev asked, well, what's the secret to running a successful business? And Rosalie said, well, there's the 3 M's, management, marketing and motivation. And then Rosalie said, well, there's a 4th M as well, medication. Well, that was great. Terrific. I mean, it was a fantastic. To me, there's just a couple of things that sort of stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
From some of those interviews, the more personal, the sort of human moments, I guess.
And we've recapped a bit of that today, and I guess, Matt, as you take the reins of this series and drive it forward in the future, I think you'll find one of the first questions we always ask people is, tell us about your heritage to the area. What brought you here? Were you born here? Did you go to school here? We should probably get yours before you start.
Yeah, well, I was never really. I shouldn't be here in my mind. I wasn't going to be here now. Because I came to Albury-Wodonga on a radio journey, and it's at that time in 2006, it was very much a stepping stone market, and you would go in and you would do maybe 2 years, and then you would move on. The dream being, make it to Metro and be the next Carl Sandilands or Hamish and Andy or whatever it was, And I've talked to a few people about this over the years, but this place has a way of just grabbing hold of you. And as I said, I never thought that I would be here, but I'm so glad that I am, because really it's just a remarkable place. And I do remember when the announcement was made that I was moving, it was from the Sunshine Coast to Albury-Wodonga. And a lot of the people at the Sunshine Coast radio station, it was a new station, they'd actually come from Albury-Wodonga. And they told me, you'll absolutely love it. We actually miss it. And, they're up on the sunny coast, the beaches and the weather and everything. And I was like, yeah, okay, no worries. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there a couple of years. No, it really does. They were exactly right. Like the people, the culture, the proximity to Melbourne, and the fact that we're on the highway. It's just a wonderful place, and really it's just worked its way. I know this will sound a bit corny, but it's worked its way into my heart over the years. And now finally, I think after this long, I feel like a proper local. And yeah, it's been a wonderful journey here. I'm so thankful that I didn't leave after 2 years.
Stephen, it's a really good insight into what we spoke back at the start of this around, if you watch and take in all the themes, and having sat here with the 55 guests prior to today, there was something about this place. Maybe it is the lure of the particular environment, the opportunities and everything that Matt's just beautifully described there for what's happened to him, that might be the common theme that we've found throughout the journey as well, as the lure of the area.
And it's a good thing that that this only goes, is only broadcast in the country, because if this got into the city, we would be inundated.
I know. I can't. When I go to Melbourne,
it's our little secret, right?
Exactly. I grew up in the city, so I came over from England to Adelaide when I was 8, and then I lived in Sydney. I lived in Brisbane, and I considered myself a city guy. But now, when I go back to a place like Melbourne, I just cannot wait to get. I know you hear this all the time. I can't wait to get the hell out. I mean, I just think this is the perfect size and lifestyle. It's just, you're dead right. Like, it's a best kept secret, and it's great to keep it that way to a large extent. We want it to grow, but at a nice pace, because it is just perfect.
We've got to train all those people to fit in with us. We don't want them to
bring their city
our
pace
theirs.
into our lifestyle.
They've got to fit in with us.
They'll get the idea. Don't you worry.
Stephen, just before we wrap up, any final thoughts or words?
No, really. Just I'd like to thank you to Kev. You've been with the journey for just about every one of the 55 episodes. I think there was 2 that you missed out on, and Kylie King stepped in and did those.
A great fill-in, if ever you need one.
So good thing I didn't ask you about Michelle Mannering or Jodie Tiernan was the other one.
Still watched both of those, and yes, Jodie getting locked up, and
so done a terrific job, and it's been from our point of view, it's been a terrific collaboration, and to watch it grow. And to what it is now is fantastic, and so thank you very much for all you put into it, and it really just naturally get the best out of people when they're sitting on this side of the microphone, and I've done it. I know what it's like. It's daunting, but I really enjoyed it at the end of the day, and I'm sure everyone has enjoyed that experience with you. So.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as I said earlier in this episode, it's actually shaped some of my decisions in life, being part of this, to sort of pick up from the wisdom of others and their experiences, and it can actually, have a really positive impact on you if you go and pay attention to the words of others. I think that's definitely something you can't put a price on, is having that exposure. So thanks to BMG Partners and yourself, Stephen, for bringing the idea to life. And I know over the years, as more and more people have been interviewed, and therefore that natural sort of social network has spread, Matt, and you'll get to see this. Fresh people get exposed to the concept every time, and once they've heard their friend be interviewed, they tend to go, oh, these other people, what's their story? I've never heard of them. And it has quite this powerful bit. So it's in good hands with Matt. Stephen, it's in good hands with Matt.
I've no doubt whatsoever. And Matt, thank you very much for receiving that handball and taking up the mantle, and I know you'll do a terrific job as well. And
I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, our history, myself and Kev, goes back many, many, many years, and funny how things have worked out. I took over from you on one radio job and now another one, and this as well. But Kev, honestly, I just want to echo what Stephen said. What an incredible run, both on radio and for the journey as well. Well done, mate. Congratulations.
But I promise I will come back with my own journey once I figure out what it looks like, because I know a lot of people said, I think Travis Cartwright, the old cameraman, you've got to do Kev's journey. I'm like, no, there's no, wait for me to have a story to tell. But there probably are a few things I can tell. Sometime in the near future, I'd probably be pretty happy to sit down on the opposite side here and share a few bits and pieces.
Don't think you're off the hook, Kev. No. I was looking forward to you interviewing yourself.
That'd be good, actually.
So, Kev, tell me, where did you go to school?
Now, before we go, though, Kev, I do know that there's a tradition on the journey, and that is 3 final questions to wrap up. Now, I have them here, so I didn't stuff it up. I've got them on paper here. So I, if you don't mind, would love to ask the 3 questions to you.
Go.
All right. Well, the first one, if you're able to invite 3 people to your dinner party, dead or alive, Kev Poulton, who would they be?
This is a real mix. You're going to enjoy this, right? So, being the sucker romantic that I am, I'd have my wife any day of the week. I'd have my wife to dinner, lunch, breakfast as well. Like, just the companionship's
some
brilliant.
Brownie points right there, Kev.
More emotionally, I did lose my sister to cancer some years ago now, probably not just long before we started the Journey series, and which is probably why I've probably absorbed a fair bit of what other people have said. And she passed away at 42, far too young. And I'd have her back at the dinner table. And then the other one, I think, is Richard Branson. Sir Richard
interesting,
Branson.
yes.
So for me, he's just living his life. And yes, he's ridiculously wealthy and doing stupid things and pushing barriers, but he looks to be enjoying himself doing it, and he tends to not care what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, so true.
I just think it'd be fascinating to sit there just with him and let those close to me, in terms of my wife and my late sister, hear someone that inspirational to speak and enter that conversation like a journey, because I don't think anyone's mentioned him over the journey as somebody they'd sit with. There's Michelle Obama's, there's all different bits and pieces, but Richard Branson, I saw him recently on an interview, fascinating fella. You just think about it for a moment, from selling records out of the boot of the car to taking man and woman to space. What a life.
Yeah. No,
Kev, now, who's cooking at this dinner party?
Well, I should have put a chef in my list. I always thought if you ask who's coming for dinner, make one of them the chef. My wife cooks okay.
Richard Branson might be able to cook something up, I don't know.
Anybody who knows me knows I won't just eat the horse, I'll chase the rider as well. So the sweet or savoury question is usually, I think, Matt, the next one.
Yes, sweet or savoury, Kev.
And I'd probably always go savoury. But, jelly slice, it's a good sweet. I'd always probably finish with some jelly
You're
slice.
not going to knock much back.
No.
Is that fair to say?
And as I've grown older, my appetite and my taste buds have matured. So I've gone from the old, steak and veg right through to anything spicy. I'll have it all now. Give it all a go.
Very good.
Yeah.
And the final traditional question is plans for the weekend, Kev Poulton.
Oh, geez, they're starting to look more and more boring as each day goes by, which is good. Weekends for us in our household with 5 kids, it's all about sport. And that's not just one code. There's often 2, 3, 4 different codes. But in between those madness and the trips and the different comps and what have you, it usually is just as much time as possible. And it takes a fair bit of training and trying to coordinate calendars just to sit on the couch at home as a group of 7 of us. So hopefully this weekend I can fit a bit more of that in. But yeah, definitely for a long time now, weekends have been working. And I think a lot of people, Matt, you'll find on the journey, when they're doing what they love,
yes,
they just live life, and that's essentially what their contribution is, and often earns them an income. Not necessarily my case, taking kids to sport.
All right, now there is one more. It does say if we've got time. Do we have time, Kev, for one more, do you think?
We'll make time for this, yeah.
All right. Well, how about I ask both Stephen and I'll ask you this, Kev, as well. Do you have any good recommendations for us, whether it's something you're reading, watching, or listening to? Basically, what are you consuming at the moment, Stephen?
Okay, it's it might come as a surprise, but most of my time is busy keeping up with all the financial press and tax and economics and markets and so on. So, and then I know, with exercising with my swimming buddies in the morning, walking, sometimes in my speedos, and
don't do that
we're
again,
we're a little bit more old school, so we talk to each other. So is that like some sort of that's an old version of a podcast, isn't it?
Yes.
Listening to people. However, I do. Kevin, you mentioned earlier that the Journey podcasts are about the right length for a session on the wind trainer, and I've been consuming more and more podcasts, including the Journey. That's where I listen to the Journey episodes now on the wind trainer, and but there's also some excellent material on ABC. I listened to a series called China, if you're listening, throughout the last couple of years. That was great, and the BBC. A lot of the history. I didn't do history at school, but I'm quite fascinated by some of the history lessons that you can pick up there. But my daughter put me onto a very scary series called the Lazarus Heist, which is about cybercrime and North Korea's involvement in cybercrime. So it's a good listen for anyone, because it teaches you how important it is to be cyber alert when you're dealing with things. And I won't give it away. I'll leave it at that. But so a little bit, sort of probably predictable in my answer, Matt, but that's okay. I'm an accountant and very conservative, and that's what you get.
What about you, Kev?
My answer is going to be very short and sweet. I don't often sit down and watch something on TV, and it's not the stuff that everybody else tends to watch that I end up watching. But I happen to see, how the main free-to-air TV channels now are telling people about their streaming services.
Yes.
And Channel 7 said on 7 Plus we've got a series called Pan Am, and it stars Margot Robbie. And I thought, well, there's an Aussie actress. She's easy on the eye. It sounds like it's about airlines. I love travel, so I love flying. and it's based back in the 60s, and it's just a little gem that I just happened to go through the first 3 episodes. I think there's about 17 or 18. I've only got 2 left to go. It's probably taken me 6 months to get through the episodes, so it's not binge watching, but it's just one of those things where it was just appreciative to see an Australian that's gone on, done a lot of big movies and what have you, but it's still done a little series whilst overseas. And it's just an interesting story on Pan Am. It's called Pan Am. And,
That's cool.
And yeah, it's just quite an interesting sort of yesteryear. You can sort of feel it as it comes across on screen, and I'd recommend people to watch it.
Yeah, nice. Well, I've enjoyed my little contribution to the final Kev Poulton journey. Thank you very much for inviting me in.
No, as we said, it's in safe hands, and BMG Partners enabling people to achieve. Stephen, you're doing a great job, I should say. Thanks to you for allowing me to be the face of it for over 5 years, but also for the community to be able to learn and grow together from each other. It's a really valuable thing, and it'll only just keep growing and growing as it goes forward. So best of luck to both of you as it goes forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kev, and thanks and welcome, Matt.
Yes, thank you. A great job, Kev. And I can't wait to have you on for your journey soon. We'll work on him.
And we mustn't forget Ollie, who's doing all the recording
Yes.
and making us look good and sound good. So thank you, Ollie, who's behind the camera over there.
Great, and the journey will be back with a fresh one next month.